Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are tackling something that I know a lot of you out there struggle with.
Oh, yeah.
It's those moments when you feel like your English learning has just totally plateaued.
Uh,
You've been putting in the work, but the progress just isn't there.
right.
Trust me, you are not alone.
It's so common to hit those plateaus in language learning.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's like you're climbing a mountain,
Yeah,
you know, and just when you think you found a good rhythm, the terrain changes.
exactly. And what's even more frustrating is sometimes you can't even pinpoint what's holding you back.
Right.
And that's where we come in.
Yeah.
So we've been going through some really fascinating material about common habits that can secretly sabotage your English progress.
And the thing is, these aren't necessarily obvious things like not studying enough or avoiding speaking practice.
Right.
We're going to dig into those subtle, sneaky habits that you might not even realize are affecting your learning.
Yes, before we get into the specifics, I want to remind everybody why we're even bothering with all this English learning in the first place.
Yeah.
It's about so much more than just grammar rules and vocabulary lists.
It is.
It's about opening up a whole new world of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Think about confidently navigating a foreign city.
Yes.
Connecting with people from different cultures, or even landing that dream job that you never thought you could get.
It's about removing those communication barriers and expanding your horizons in ways you might not even imagine yet.
So our mission today is to help you identify those sneaky habits
Right.
and, more importantly, give you the tools to replace them with strategies that actually work.
Exactly.
We're going to explore how you learn best,
Mhm.
the role of practice, and how your mindset can make all the difference.
We'll be drawing on the source material that you provided, but we'll also be sharing some personal anecdotes and examples to make this as relatable and actionable as possible.
One of the biggest takeaways for me from the research is this idea that sometimes it's not about how much effort you're putting in,
Right.
it's about how you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was trying to learn French, I spent hours memorizing verb conjugations,
Oh, wow.
but I wasn't actually using the language in any real-life situation.
Yeah.
No wonder I felt stuck.
That's where understanding your learning style comes in.
Yeah.
So, for example, some people are visual learners, and they might benefit from using flashcards or watching videos.
Mm-hmm.
Others might be auditory learners, and they might learn better by listening to podcasts or
Yeah.
music.
Right?
And then there are kinesthetic learners who need to incorporate movement and hands-on activities into their learning.
That's so true. I'm definitely more of a visual learner, and I didn't even realize that until I started experimenting with different study methods.
Right.
So if you've been hitting a wall with your current approach, maybe it's time to shake things up and try something new.
Absolutely. The key is to be aware of your own learning preferences and tailor your study strategies accordingly.
Yes.
It's like finding the right key
Yeah.
to unlock your language learning potential.
Speaking of keys, one thing that really resonated with me from the research is this idea of active versus passive vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
You might have a huge passive vocabulary, all those words you recognize when you read or hear them,
Right.
but a much smaller active vocabulary, the words you can actually use confidently in speaking and writing.
That's a really important distinction, and it explains why you might feel like you understand a lot of English,
Yeah.
but you struggle to express yourself fluently.
Right.
It's like having a toolbox full of tools, but not knowing how to use them.
So how do we bridge that gap between passive and active vocabulary?
That's where the magic of practice comes in.
Okay.
And not just any kind of practice, but focused practice that forces you to actively retrieve and use the words you've learned.
Right. It's not enough to just passively absorb new words.
Exactly.
You need to actively engage with them. Use them in sentences, make mistakes, and learn from those mistakes.
Think of it like learning to play a musical instrument. You can't just read sheet music or watch someone else play.
Right.
You need to put your fingers on the keys and practice regularly to develop that muscle memory and fluency.
And speaking of practice, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Yep.
Speaking practice. I
Um,
know so many learners who get incredibly nervous about speaking English, even if they have a good understanding of grammar and vocabulary.
That fear of making mistakes is a real obstacle for many learners. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Mistakes are an essential part of the learning process.
Totally. How do you expect to learn if you're not pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone?
Exactly.
It's in those moments of messing up that your brain actually starts making new connections.
What's important is to shift your perspective from viewing mistakes as failures to seeing them as valuable learning opportunities.
I love that it's like those motivational posters that say, mistakes are proof that you're trying.
Exactly. And the more you practice speaking, the more comfortable and confident you'll become.
Okay, before we move on, I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Have you ever felt that frustration of knowing the words, understanding the grammar,
Uh-huh.
but then completely freezing up when you try to speak?
Oh, absolutely. It's like your
Yes.
brain suddenly goes blank and you can't access the words, you know, are in there somewhere.
Right?
It's a common experience, and it often stems from a lack of practice in retrieving and using those words spontaneously.
Like stage fright, but for language learners.
Exactly.
And the more you let that fear control you, the less likely you are to actually make progress.
One of the best ways to overcome this fear is to practice in low-pressure environments.
Okay.
This could be anything from talking to yourself in English to joining an online language exchange group where everyone is learning and making mistakes together.
I remember when I first started practicing my Spanish with a language partner,
Uh,
I was so nervous I could barely get a sentence out. But after a few sessions, I started to relax and focus more on the communication itself rather than on speaking perfectly.
that's a great example of how creating a safe and supportive environment can make a world of difference.
Yeah.
When you feel comfortable making mistakes, you're more likely to take risks and experiment with the language, which is essential for growth.
And speaking of comfort zones, another sneaky habit that can sabotage our progress is comparing ourselves to others.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've all been there scrolling through social media,
Mm,
seeing other people's language learning journeys,
right.
and feeling like we're not good enough or not progressing fast enough.
Comparison is truly the thief of joy, especially in language learning.
Right.
It's so easy to get caught up in the myth of fast fluency and feel discouraged when we don't see instant results.
I've definitely fallen into that trap before. Like, why can't I just binge watch a few seasons of a show and magically become fluent?
If only it were that easy.
Right.
But the reality is that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time, consistency, and patience. And it's important to remember that everyone's journey is unique.
That's a good point. Some people might have more time to dedicate to learning,
Right.
while others might have different learning styles or life circumstances that affect their progress.
Exactly. So instead of comparing yourself to others, focus on your own progress. Celebrate your small wins and remember that every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory.
I love that it's so easy to get caught up in what we haven't achieved yet and forget to acknowledge how far we've come.
And sometimes we even compare ourselves to an idealized version of ourselves, setting unrealistic expectations that can be incredibly demotivating.
Oh, I know that feeling. Like, I should be able to watch this movie without subtitles by now, or I should be able to give a presentation in English without any notes.
Right.
But setting those kinds of unrealistic expectations can actually backfire and make you feel like you're failing.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It's much more effective to break down your goals into smaller, more achievable steps and celebrate those milestones along the way.
So instead of aiming for perfection, yeah.
Maybe it's about understanding the gist of a news article or having a basic conversation with a neighbor.
Right.
Those little victories can really add up and keep you motivated.
Speaking of motivation, let's talk about another common culprit that can derail our learning. Procrastination.
Yeah, procrastination is a sneaky one.
It is.
It's like we know we should be practicing,
Uh-huh.
but then there's always something else that seems more important or more appealing in the moment.
Procrastination is often driven by a combination of factors: fear of failure, feeling overwhelmed, or simply lacking motivation.
I think for me, it's often a combination of feeling overwhelmed and not knowing where to start.
Right.
Like when I think about all the things I need to learn to become fluent, it just feels so daunting.
One powerful strategy for overcoming procrastination is to break down your learning goals into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay.
Instead of saying, I'm going to study English for an hour today, try setting a timer for 10 or 15 minutes and focusing on one specific task, like reviewing vocabulary or practicing pronunciation. That's a great tip. It's so much easier to get started when you have a clear and achievable goal in mind, and those short bursts of focused practice can be incredibly effective, especially if you do them consistently.
Exactly. It's like those fitness trackers that encourage you to take 10,000 steps a day.
Right.
It feels much more achievable than just saying, I need to exercise more. And just like with physical fitness, consistency is key in language learning.
Yes.
Even if you can only spare 15 minutes a day, those short bursts of practice will add up over time.
You know, it's funny because when I think back to when I was really making progress with my language learning,
Yeah.
it wasn't because I was spending hours and hours studying every day.
Yeah.
It was because I found ways to integrate it into my daily life and make it fun.
Absolutely.
Huh.
When you enjoy the process, you're
Yeah.
more likely to stick with it.
Right.
And there are so many creative and enjoyable ways to learn English nowadays.
Wow.
You can watch movies and TV shows with subtitles, listen to podcasts, read books, play language learning games, or even connect with other learners online.
I love that it's about finding what sparks your interest and making language learning a part of your daily life rather than a chore.
And remember, learning a language is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
Embrace the process. Be patient with yourself and celebrate every milestone along the way.
Okay, so we've talked about all these sneaky habits and how to ditch them, but let's bring it back to why we're doing all of this in the first place.
Right. Let's shift gears from the challenges to the incredible payoff that awaits.
Think about it confidently navigating a foreign city,
Hmm.
not as a tourist fumbling with a phrase book, but as someone who can truly connect with the locals, understand the nuances,
Yeah.
maybe even crack a joke or two.
Absolutely.
Imagine enjoying movies and music without subtitles, not just grasping the basic plot, but fully appreciating the wordplay,
Yes.
humor, the emotional depth.
All of it.
Or picture yourself in that dream job interview, not struggling to find the right words, but eloquently expressing your ideas and landing the position because of your fluency.
The game changer.
These aren't just pipe dreams. These are achievable goals.
They are.
And by recognizing and addressing those sneaky habits, you're paving the path to make them a reality.
You are.
But here's a thought that wasn't explicitly in the research but really struck me.
Okay.
What if the biggest shift isn't just in what we do, but in how we view the whole learning process?
That's a fascinating point. What do you mean?
Instead of seeing it as this uphill battle, this chore we have to conquer,
Uh-huh.
what if we embrace it as a journey of discovery of continuous growth?
I love that.
Like instead of focusing solely on the destination fluency,
Right.
we start appreciating the scenery along the way, the
Yeah.
little aha moments,
Mhm.
the connections we make, the cultural insights we gain.
It changes everything.
And that shift in mindset from I have to I get to learn that
Mm-hmm.
can be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. It transforms learning from a burden into a privilege,
Yes.
a source of joy and fulfillment. And that kind of intrinsic motivation is what keeps you going even when things get tough.
So before we wrap up, we want to leave you with a challenge. Think of one habit you want to change starting today.
One.
It could be anything we've discussed.
Uh.
Procrastination, fear of making mistakes,
Right.
whatever's holding you back.
Write it down.
Write it down.
Share it with a friend. Make yourself accountable because even the smallest step taken consistently can lead to incredible results.
And remember, this isn't about reaching some arbitrary finish line and declaring yourself fluent.
Wow.
Language is constantly evolving. There's always something new to discover.
Exactly. Embrace the journey. Be patient with yourself and celebrate every victory, no matter how small.
That's it for this deep dive into breaking free from those sneaky habits. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. Remember, you have the ability to transform your English learning experience. Until next time, happy learning.